Before his doomed 2008 presidential run, the then Senator Joe Biden, following the unofficial candidate tradition, released a pre-campaign memoir, Promises to Keep on Life and Politics. The book recounts his childhood and his staggering 39 years back then in politics up to that point. By the end of his vice presidency, it was 47 years. In it, he explains away the plagiarism scandal that effectively ended his 1988 presidential run by saying his words felt absolutely authentic. At the very least, he learned a lesson. You should not run for president because technically you can win, Biden writes. The questions you have to ask are why you're running for president and what will you do when you are president. You shouldn't run until you know the answers to these questions. Biden has run again for president, proving that a third time's the term, seemingly without really answering the questions. Democratic primary voters nominated him not because of any policy agenda or vision for that country, but because polling consistently showed he had the best shot at defeating the fat ass. Biden's own campaign hammered this point almost daily for months, while rivals such as Senator Bernie Sanders highlighted their health care reforms and tax plans and tactics. To paraphrase his book, were central to Biden's entire what they call rationale for running. To his campaign's credit, Biden's competence in this strategy kept him coolly on message. When the press were writing him off after his humiliating placement in the Iowa caucuses, Biden's wife turned to voters and laid out what this election was really about: beating pumpkin tits. I know that not all of you are committed to my husband, and I respect that. But I want you to think about your candidate, his or her electability, and who's going to win this race. She said in New Hampshire just days before the state's primary. Voters found that message unconvincing at the time. Neither did it resonate in Nevada, where Biden hardly campaigned at all and earned just over 20% of the vote, compared to Sanders' 46.8%, but Biden stayed on message, knowing for all that Democratic voters spoke about racial justice, income inequality, and health care access. The most important thing was humiliating the squatter. And as the race turned to his favor following the South Carolina primary, it was not because of any eureka moment, but voters who finally understood what Biden's America would look like. It was because he had proven his ability to win over black voters, a crucial consistency that is responsible for having just every Democrat in the White House for the last 20 years. Once that became clear, the rest of the Democratic Party voters fell in line, and Biden had passed the implicit test. Other candidates, namely Sanders, naively believed ideas would ultimately win out in the end over Democrats' simple desire to remove the fat ass from office. Following that particular primary, former President Barack Obama had swiftly sought to end any remaining debate about the future of the Democratic Party. He jumped on the phone with candidates such as Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar and explained why their path to the nomination was now closed. They'd have more leverage to get cabinet positions if they dropped out and now endorsed Biden before the pivotal Super Tuesday primaries, and that's what they did. But the nomination wrapped up, Biden's toughest days were presumably ahead, and not only were journalists who literally cheered for Senator Elizabeth Warren during one Democratic debate from the press room now theoretically forced to turn their attention to an elderly man that they believed to have insufficiently woke the racial sensibilities and no plan to eliminate all their college debt. He will be forced to create a meaningful contrast with the squatter who oversaw record-breaking unemployment numbers, rising wages, and new wars. But right around the time Biden's nomination seemed wrapped up, the medical and political communities finally began to accept the seriousness of the looming COVID-19 pandemic. They handed Biden a new argument as soon as the old one expired. He could now say he was running for president to rescue the country from a plague exacerbated by pumpkin tits' incompetence. The pandemic had the added effect of giving Biden reason to run the campaign from his basement, which basically he doesn't stay in the basement anyway, meaning that the average reporter covering his campaign could enjoy libations at various three-star hotels in Wilmington, Delaware, with any semblance of a substantial policy debate vanishing. Instead, Biden would be asked by the press what, in the face of thousands of people dying, he thinks the government's response says about pumpkin tits of soul, or whether Biden was sufficiently angry at the squatter's supposed years-old remark about deceased soldiers which were just remembered by anonymous sources. The traditional merging of the press and the Democratic nominee's campaign this time meant a referendum not on policy but on empathy. The voters had awarded Biden a comfortable popular victory on top of a substantial one in the Electoral College, to the extent one can trust exit polls. Biden's victory had little to do with just about anything he said or did on the campaign trail. Up to 71% of the voters who said their vote constituted support for a specific candidate. Just 46% said so for Biden, compared to 53% for pumpkin tits. Only 49% said that they held a favorable opinion of Biden, with only 43% saying the same for pumpkin tits. This dynamic was reflected in Biden's complete lack of coattails in a down ballot race, where voters dropped the empathy question and made sure to repudiate the policies pushed by the rest of Biden's party at the Senate. House and local levels, voters overwhelmingly rejected Democratic candidates, many of them incumbents, suggesting that the party, paradoxically, faces a more serious branding crisis than the GOP. Despite predictions from polling shamans, the Democratic margin in the House will shrink to its lowest level since the Obama administration. In private phone calls with Democratic leadership, lawmakers complained about the damage that the defund the police movement has done to the party. The majority of the minority of California voted almost as a center-right and struck down ballot initiatives to revitalize the affirmative action and expand the franchise partially to 17-year-olds. Despite the best efforts by Democrats to tie pumpkin tits to the Republican Party, voters appeared to know better. The GOP did not lose control of a single what they call state legislative after Election Day, and made gains in swing states such as Pennsylvania, Iowa, North Carolina, and New Hampshire, after hundreds of millions of dollars, often in dark money, flooded these local races from Democratic groups. The stain left by a summer of race riots did nothing to reassure voters that giving the left local control of government was a good idea. That brings us back to Biden's initial question of what exactly a candidate would do when he's elected president. He said, basically, to win a race, it seems the answer can be easy as the opposite of the other guy. And in a time of deadly pandemic, that can sound pretty convincing. The problem for Biden is that voters seem to send the message that they like a lot of what the GOP does as well. Not really. When he enters office in January, Biden seems unlikely to be able to deliver the most progressive administration since FDR. As he often promised the weary Sanders supporters, neither should Moscow Mitch have his way. Will he be able to deliver one as democratic as Obama's or even Bill Clinton's? But both of them enjoyed the unified government after winning their elections. Odds of statements for Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico have dropped precipitously, and Democrats could struggle to get a single appeals judge confirmed. Forget stacking the Supreme Court if the Republicans retain control of the Senate. Any fig leaf to the party's most radical wing, such as making Sanders Secretary of Labor, is likely to remain a dream, even though Biden was warming to the idea as the election drew closer. Despite his former boss's ban on the practice, a preliminary list of Biden's staff appointments includes at least 40 lobbyists, his future chief of staff, Ronald Klain, and has enjoyed a rich career of bouncing back and forth between various Democratic administrations and campaigns, and lobbying and stints in finance. One advantage of running a campaign is based entirely on its utility in the general election is that it keeps expectations low. Deep down, progressives know they can't truly feel betrayed when they see former Goldman Sachs partner and for-profit College Board member Gary Gensler as a leading candidate for winning the Securities and Exchange Commission. Neither can run-of-the-mill Democrats feel frustrated about gridlock in Congress after they insisted that only Biden, the pragmatic centrist, could win. In fact, they were more right than they knew. Nominating Biden would not only it didn't spur a blue wave, but it prevented a red wave. The Biden campaign strategy of hiding and of the hiding running mate Kamala Harris appeared to have backfired when it came to igniting the enthusiasm for the ticket, instead doubling down on utility. On the one hand, Biden wanted to send the message that he was willing to elevate the progressive future, basically of the Democratic Party, but he also made it clear on the face of mockery from pumpkin tits and the other Republicans that he would be he'd be the one in charge. The California senator has held press conferences frequently and sent her a nomination. The only real way to get access to the future second most powerful person in the world was to cough up thousands of dollars at a fundraiser. There remains little evidence that Harris was an electoral asset in any sense to Biden's ticket, but her deep ties to the California Democratic millionaire class helped usher in the money to create her most expensive presidential campaign in history. The public remains skeptical of the choice, and her favorability ratings on Election Day remained underwater, and Biden hardly let her speak that night or in the subsequent In the subsequent days, when it became increasingly obvious that they had won, Harris's use, particularly as Biden, will likely find himself at the mercy of Senate Republicans. But as all has been spent, there will be so much to scrutinize Biden over in the years to come. Scandals related to his son Hunter Biden will likely find new life should the Republicans keep the Senate. His plan to tackle the coronavirus pandemic no way substantially differs from Fat Ass 45's. The economy remains the most damaged since the Great Depression, and the Democratic Party sees either a cure in the Obama-era technocratic democratism or cynical opportunity to usher in a new era of massively expanding welfare state to compensate those who may never see their previous jobs come back. A bipartisan consensus has emerged against China, creating one of the most serious foreign policy challenges since the Cold War. But now that House Democrats are weakened and Senate centrists empowered in a close to even upper chamber, Biden will have more decision-making power relative to his left flank than previously thought. So what will he do? He got away with leaving that question unanswered. So far, come January, that ceases to be an option. Joe Biden has been in public life for half a century, and come January, we're about to find out why. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, Random Mike, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out, and thanks for listening.